Welcome, Bay Community, to another Wellness Wednesday. We are going to get right into our next topic for the day. Here we go. So, this week, we're going to discuss supporting kids' mental health during the transition back to school. And we want to pay attention to, going back to school can be particularly stressful for kids and parents alike. I know I'm a little stressed out right now, trying to make sure that the kids have everything that they need, while also trying to enjoy the last few days of summer. So today we'll explore the strategies to ease that transition, while maintaining, healthy mental health, well-being, and create a positive start to the new academic year. I couldn't pick a quote this week, so I picked a bunch because I thought they were all so good. So, education's the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world by Nelson Mandela. The beautiful thing about learning is that no one can take it away from you, from B.B. King. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest from Benjamin Franklin, and the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled by Plutarch. So all of these quotes were just so powerful for me. I felt that they were all inspiring for what we were talking about today. Any transition requires adaptation. Research shows that major schedule changes can raise our cortisol levels, not just in us, but in our children. And this rise in cortisol level can affect mood, attention, and their behavior. So if we think about the times where we've been really stressed out, we're definitely more irritable, right? We're more irritable. We might react to things we normally wouldn't react to. We also sometimes aren't thinking as logically as we want to. So recognize that just transitioning from summer to school creates that rise in cortisol level. So for us, and for our kids, we want to make sure that we're taking that into account and trying to ease this transition as much as possible. There are four major factors that are highly predictive, for a smooth adjustment. Supporting these four areas can reduce stress and help children approach school with confidence in the coming school year. And we're going to go over all four. Just to read what's up here, the first one is sleep quality and quantity. I've talked about sleep before, and we know how important it is. We want to talk about emotional regulation skills, not controlling emotion, but regulating. I always tell my kids, everyone's going to get angry, mad, sad, jealous, happy, all of the things, excited. It's not that we don't feel, it's the decision or the reaction or behavior to what emotions we're having is what counts. So another one, peer relationships and social support. This can change year to year. Over the summer, some kids may spend more or less time with friends that they had during the school year, and this can also create a sense of anxiety, a sense of competence. It's all summer long. A lot of kids aren't doing anything that's related to school. So, they're having to recognize that they forgot to read that book they were supposed to read over the summer, or they're not sure how they're going to do in a new class, or maybe they have to take classes that their friends aren't in, which can reduce confidence because they have to be in the class by themselves. So there are lots of different things we want to consider. And if we can adjust for these, we really can make a smoother transition for our kids going back to school. Okay, so let's get into it. Sleep. You've heard this so many times from me, and I'm going to say it again. Sleep shows, studies show that consistent sleep schedules improve both behavior and academic performance. So this isn't just about getting that 8 hours of sleep or 9 hours, depending on how young your child is. this is also about being consistent. So while some of us might want to hold on to those last minutes of summer and let kids stay up as late as they can, really and truly, what we want to start doing now is starting to adjust the kids' schedule back to the schedule they're going to need to have during the school year. Sometimes this isn't as easy because of things that are going on. Like right now, my daughter's in a sleepaway camp, so I have no control over her when she's going to bed and when she's waking up in the morning. And likely she's staying up pretty late. But the week before school, at the very least, we are definitely going to rein it in and make sure that our wake and sleep schedule is starting to look like what they're going to need to do for the school year. Because we know that if they get good sleep, they're going to have better focus, they're going to have better mood, they're going to be more motivated to do the things they don't want to do. If they have poor sleep, either they're not sleeping while they're in bed or they're going to sleep late, they're going to be irritable, they're going to have poor concentration, they're going to have anxiety. And this is going to make that transition back to school harder. So, one of the things we can do for this are two things. One, I suggest the first day you try to work on the when they get up first. It's hard, but here's why. I have no studies to back this up. So this is my opinion. Okay? Because I've tried it. If you try to start with the going to sleep schedule for a small percentage of kids, that's going to work really well because they're kids that are rule followers, they're compliant, they know sleep's important, they value sleep, they're probably not night owls. Okay. So they're going to want to go to sleep on time because they get up early and they want to do things. So that's my son. For him, I'm just going to start getting him to sleep on time. For my daughter, who's a night owl, I am likely going to have to get her up early and just deal with the consequences. Get her up early, get her moving, and don't let her take a nap. And then at the end of the day, getting her to bed at a reasonable hour. You know, this, I used to do this for jet lag when I would have to come fly across the world and I had to switch into a new time zone really quickly. It's better to push through on that first day and stay up and be tired when you should be tired. Then you'll be more likely to sleep through the night. Yeah, you might wake up a little early or, sleep in a little bit more, but your body's going to adjust more quickly. So I recommend trying to get them up early, closer to the time they need to get up during the school year. Then that night, you can start the wind down routine again. The wind down routine, 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. Turn off lights. For younger kids, you can actually have them go around the house and start turning off lights because that gives them something to do and it reminds them turning off lights is something they can do to go to bed. You want to make sure the lights in the kids' rooms, if you haven't done this already, make sure that the bulbs that are in the rooms are all lower wattage bulbs or have a dimmer on them so that they can be softer, lower light. Their bedrooms are for sleep. They don't need bright lights in there. So the lower the light, the better. You can start reining in those screens and those devices, getting them out of the bedrooms, making sure we have a plug-in station. And yes, I was loose with it during the summer, but now is a time I'll start reining that in. And at a certain time, everyone has to plug in all their devices at the plug-in station, and then everyone goes up to their room. Parents included. It doesn't necessarily have to stay that way, but we try and do that for as long as we can because kids are less likely to argue with us about that if we're doing it too. Excuse me. Okay, the routine reset. Routine activates the brain's prediction system, right? The brain likes things that are predictable. It allows the brain to feel like we're in control. So the more we can have a predictable situation, the likely we're going to reduce anxiety. So reducing uncertainty, having predictable behavior and having predictable schedule will reduce uncertainty and thus reduce anxiety and stress. Even small rituals can be really grounding. We just talked about one, which is the wind down routine, having the kids walk around and turn out lights, brushing your teeth, taking a bath or a shower, right? Picking out clothes for the next day. All of these things are a great way to start incorporating them back in. You can even have kids maybe you did this all summer. If you did, kudos to you. But starting to have the kids think about what they want in their lunches during the school year and maybe even having them make their lunch the week before, just the night before, that they'll eat that day, right? So you're not making it for a week in advance, but it's still the summer, but saying, hey, what are we going to eat tomorrow for lunch? And having them make their sandwich or put things on the counter that they want to eat for lunch as long as it doesn't need to be refrigerated. Having them do things like that can be all part of them helping to get ready for the school year. Having the kids uh, view their schedules for the year, if you have that, is great. That's a great way to get them starting to think about it. Now, for most schools, you can go online and you can view school supply lists based on your school. You do that, and most of them are hosted by the county school organization, and then you can look up your school independently. Get those supply lists out. For a lot of us, we might already have leftover supplies from last year. So have the kids go through the supplies and have them get their book bags ready now. Um, that's a little side note, but basically getting kids back into a routine and getting them to prepare things the day or the night before for something the next day is getting them in that kind of school routine where we do that, right? We do homework the night before. Maybe we lay out our clothes. We do things the day or the night before to prepare us for the next day. So starting to do things like that will help your child kind of get into school mode again, even though none of us are ready. Okay, emotional check-ins can be really good. We understand that we need to help the kids emotionally regulate. Well, in order to be able to regulate, you need to know what emotions you're having. I'm a big fan of having for younger kids, you can have you can look up an emotion sheet on Google and you can get a page that looks like a bunch of emojis. You can have the kids start to label their emotions. Okay. Labeling emotions activates the prefrontal cortex. That's right here. And that and and labeling emotions helps regulate the amygdala, which is in the middle of our brain. So why is that important? I'll tell you. Your prefrontal cortex is where executive function happens. Okay, so that means planning. That means thinking about the future. That means maybe putting off a reward in order to get something done, right? All of those things that are kind of more mature skills all happen in the prefrontal cortex. And our kids are still growing that part of our brain. And so activating that prefrontal cortex can be done in small part by just starting to label emotions. So every day when your child gets up, maybe asking them to fill out the emoji sheet or point to something on the emoji sheet that is how they're feeling. For older kids, just ask them, like, what's the emotion that's you're starting your day with? And you're going to get some interesting answers. Maybe ending the night or at dinner time saying, hey, what was the most dominant emotion for you today? Like I said, your teenagers are going to give you some interesting answers, but you want them to start taking that seriously because you want to do it when they're not emotional. If you do it while everything's normal and fine, they're more likely to label their emotions when they're actually going through something tough, right? When we're stressed out, it's harder to do new things. However, and that's why, SWAT teams practice and practice and practice, or, sports teams or first responders, they practice these activities over and over and over again. So when they're actually in the really stressful event, it's just habitual for them to do it. They don't have to think about it. So labeling emotions while everything's calm and good is going to help your child regulate their emotions throughout the year when they are stressed out. So, daily questions like, how was your day? I have that on there, and I have to tell you, it's not my favorite. Okay. I would rather ask my kid, what is something that went well today? Or what is something you learned today? Or tell me about how somebody made you feel today. They're much more specific questions and much harder to answer with fine, right? How was your day? Fine. Do anything fun? Yes. Right? We don't want one-word answers. So asking something that's a little bit more specific, like what was something that went well today? They might say, I don't know, but if they know you're going to ask that question every day, they're going to start thinking about it more and more, and they're going to start to have answers. And you can always lead by example. You can say, well, something that went well for me today was, fill in the blank. Um, You can also lead by example with labeling emotions. So throughout the next week or so, just sitting there and saying, I'm feeling very irritable, right? Start using emotion words that are more precise instead of those like, angry, mad, sad, happy, emotion words that are super vague and they're really the only ones we kind of rely on. We want to get more specific. So start using those or start guessing what's going on with your kids. Like you might say, you seem really blank right now. And they're either going to say, what does that mean? Or they're going to say yes, or they're going to say, no way, I don't feel that way at all. Right? Either way, you're engaging them and learning a bigger emotional vocabulary, which can be really important. Okay. You also want to normalize mixed feelings. The beginning of the school year, any type of transition usually has mixed feelings, right? So kids are excited to see friends they haven't seen all summer, but they're nervous maybe about new teachers, or they're excited for certain classes or teachers, but fearful about something else. Okay. It's okay to have more than one emotion, and we want to normalize that and talk through it. I deal with a lot of folks in my office that don't understand how to hold mixed or even conflicting emotions, but we do. We can be angry at someone and grateful at the same time. As a parent, you definitely can be that, right? You can be super angry that they didn't tell you where you're going, but when they get home, you're relieved and you're happy that they're there, right? Okay. So I mentioned something about being excited about seeing friends you haven't seen all summer or things like that. Kids, kids through young adults, our social connections are super, super important. For younger kids, the connection with parents are still a little bit stronger. As they get a little bit older, we start to get to that 10, 11, 12 social connections, their friends really are where kids start to really identify. So before they were getting their identity from their parents, the adults in their life, right? Now this is going to start to transition to their friends. So you really want to encourage your kids to not only have friends, but have them think about the friends that they have. Social belonging is a major predictor of school satisfaction and resilience, meaning that when school gets tough, if they have really good social connections, they're more likely to stick it out and persevere. So you can do things like rehearsing scenarios that build confidence for new interactions. Maybe you'll have to introduce yourself in a class and give a fact about yourself. Talk about that at dinner one night before you go to school. Because I know every time I've done that activity 1,000 times, and I always struggle coming up with the one fact about me because I think most things about me are really, really boring. And I feel like everyone else comes up with a much more exciting fact. But, so I used to always struggle with that. I would have loved to have had someone to practice that with. You can also ask kids, like, what social interactions do they think are going to occur? Maybe there's someone that they haven't seen all summer that they really miss. You can talk them through. Remember, they learn how to speak and how to converse and how to have conversations through us. So we have to teach them how to have a conversation. And a lot of times we take that for granted. Yes, they learn by watching us, but you can also help them. And I've done that especially with letter writing or thank you notes or, birthday cards for my kids, because they'll just write like happy birthday and then they'll put their name. Like, why don't you say something that you admire about the person or something that you enjoyed doing with them this year or how that person makes you feel or, any of those things, adding that makes it more personal. But I had to tell my kids to do that. And now they kind of most of the time do it without me telling them. But I had to teach it to them, even though they see I write them notes that say that, or they've seen me say that before. They really need that extra push. So going through that can really be helpful in helping kids ease into new social connections, but also just the social setting in general. Okay, building independence. Self-efficacy supports motivation and mental health. Now, granted, this is age dependent. So For younger kids, they are going to feel less independent. However, here's what I will tell you that certainly happened with me. When I was dropping my daughter off at the age of 2 to a daycare, she would scream and cry, and I felt like the worst parent in the world. And luckily, she had a really good preschool teacher that came up to me and said, you know, about 30 seconds after you leave, she's fine. And that was a huge relief for me, and I needed to hear it. Once I heard that, I felt so much better. I knew that she was upset, but it was the transition that was bothering her, right? So that's part of building independence. I tell you that story because my daughter was really young. And so, of course, she had more of a connection with me. And you'll see this the more kids get older, they want to be independent. So at home, you can practice independence by having them pick out their own clothes. I know that sounds like a tough one, especially because you don't want your kid showing up to school looking like a clown. But really and truly, at the first or second grade year, when they're younger, no one really cares. No one really cares what your kid walks into school with. There have been plenty of times where my daughter has walked into school or my son has walked into school with mismatched clothes, and I kind of feel like a bad parent. But at the end of the day, I remember they're just kids, and it's really not a big deal. And so at that age, I kind of let them play around with it. And then I might softly encourage them to say, well, this might match better, or ask them, be curious, why did you pick this out? It might just be because this is my favorite top and these were the only clean pair of shorts I had. Getting a better understanding for that, but it's a nice way to give them independence, right? You're allowing them to pick out their own clothes. They feel independent, allows them to be confident, and it gives them a little boost of, feeling like they're their own person. Obviously, as they get older, you can give them more independence. Another one is making their own lunch and picking what they put in their lunch. Obviously, this should be monitored. I think my daughter would put Doritos and, Skittles in her lunch if she had her choice. But, you can give them some independence in packing their own lunch and getting those things. Now, all of this stuff requires patience to some extent and withholding judgment. Why do I say that? Because allowing your kids to do this or teaching them how to put their lunchbox together or having them pack their book bag or things like this is going to take a little bit of time. So that first week back at school, make sure that you've allotted for a little extra time. It's 1 week, and sometimes you can flex meetings or build in a little buffer, or maybe you have a family member that could be present, a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or someone that might be able to help with guiding them without telling them what to do. And then, of course, praise effort, not outcome. So when they come down and they're all dressed, praise them for being dressed. I know that sounds silly, but say, hey, awesome, you got dressed all on your own, right? And let it go, even if they are in completely clashing colors and things that don't work. Now, if they're in clothes that's inappropriate for the school, like the temperature outside, you can just very gently say, hey, maybe you should step outside right now and see if those clothes are going to work for you for the day. And remember, you might have to go outside for recess, or you might have gym class or whatever. Ask them and help them make that decision. Okay, talked about making lunches a little bit. Nutrition directly impacts mood and cognition. Okay, cognitive function, learning, using your brain. Planning ahead helps avoid last minute unhealthy grabs. So, yeah, definitely you can help make the lunch the night before, have the kids pack the lunch. You can help them, you can sit with them and help them make the sandwiches or the whatever's the night before, and then you can get all the stuff out in the morning, have them pack their lunches. You can limit their options. So definitely high sugar snacks are tough. I just mentioned Skittles and Doritos, right? Processed and high sugar. Anything that's high sugar is going to, kids are affected by that so much more quickly than we are. You really want to look at trying to make sure you're building in, and this is all nutrition that you probably already know, but building in proteins with some carbohydrates. They're kids, they definitely need carbohydrates for fuel because they're running around, they're growing constantly, they need lots of energy. So, you know, and allowing it to be a little fun. So something my mother used to do, which I would love, is every week or when we'd have to go to the grocery store, she would let me pick out one snack and I got to pick out that snack. So yes, sometimes it was Doritos or Skittles or whatever. I keep going to those because I'm thinking of right now. But that was, she allowed me to be independent, pick out the one thing, but she picked out everything else in lunch. Now, here's where I've gone wrong on this. Don't make the one thing they pick out such a big item that fills them up, because they are most certainly going to eat the item they chose first. Yes, we can talk to them about that. Yes, I've had these conversations with my kids of eat the food that's the healthiest and that you like the least first, because you're always going to want to eat the fun item, right? The item you picked out, the junk food. So eat the healthy thing first because you need the nutrients, because you're always going to have room for the fun thing. Are little kids going to be good at that? No. But as they get older, you can tell them about it, be consistent, keep doing it. And when they become, a teenager, hopefully they've got that ingrained. And now that they're more body conscious, they might actually do it. Obviously, water bottles are so important. Most schools are great about this now. Make sure that they have a water bottle that's big enough for them, but easy enough for them to carry, all the things. A fun activity before school starts is, of course, getting school supplies, but then also labeling the supplies, right? Like putting, their name on their water bottle or their lunchbox, things like that. Okay. Managing your stress, our stress as a parent. Kids mirror our emotions. I've seen this time and again. A kid gets angry, the parent gets angry. A kid starts to scream, the parent starts to scream. It's a normal human reaction. Okay, I'm going to say that. And we are the adults, we are the ones that need to ground ourselves. So, you getting a good night's sleep, you eating healthy foods, you prepping ahead of time is going to be essential, because that will help you stay more grounded, more calm, and more present with your kids during this transition period. The more stable you are, the easier it's going to be on your kids. So, again, prepping things the night before, giving yourself plenty of time in the morning, figuring out what makes you feel more calm and relaxed. We play music in the morning for two reasons. One, music is on a timer, it comes on, it's an easy way for everyone to wake up. They know when the music comes on and it's only on for an hour. When the music goes off, it's kind of like the morning routine musical chairs. When the music goes off, we got to get out the door because we've got a certain amount of time to catch the bus. The other reason I put the music on is it's upbeat and happy. And so it's kind of, music can often help guide our emotions. If you've ever noticed, when you're sad, you tend to listen to sad music, right? When you're happy, you tend to listen to happy music. I learned this trick from the Disney Corporation. In the morning, first thing, when they're opening up Disney World, they play very upbeat kind of marching music. And they do this because they want people to march in. They want people to feel excited and upbeat, and they want them to continue to walk through the park. They don't want them to stop. And at the end of the day, the music is more calming, more relaxing. They're wanting people to finally feel tired and want to leave for the day. They want people to be thinking about what they're doing to relax for the evening. So music can help with that. You can, of course, model positive self-talk, saying something about, something that you're excited about. In yoga classes, they do this, setting your intention for the day. Okay, what are you going to work on today? I'm going to work on, and we do this a lot in the ride to school when my kids were little. What are you going to work on today to be your best self? And a lot of times, one of my kids would always say, I'm going to listen to the teacher. I'm like, okay, that's a good one. I hope you always listen to the teacher, but I'm glad you're going to work on it, right? And another one would be like, I'm going to try and, be, do something kind even when I don't need to. Okay, great. Just something like that. What are you going to do to be your best self today can help set intentions and really help your kids set your day, and also remind you to set your day, right? What are you going to do to be your best self today? Okay, now things go awry. What are the signs that we know that our kids or we might need a little extra support? Okay, Now, a reminder, these are persistent signs that may indicate anxiety or depression. Early support from school counselors or mental health professionals can help prevent an escalation. It's not a guarantee. Also, you just tuning into it and asking can also be a huge help. So, what are we looking for? Especially in younger kids, frequent stomach aches or headaches. A lot of times, kids don't understand that they're anxious. They feel funny or they don't feel good. That's the anxiety kind of presents in that way. School counselors are definitely plugged into this because I've seen it a couple times where my daughter actually had a stomach ache and it wasn't anxiety. I was so impressed by the school counselor right away. They were saying, "Oh, well, what does she go to after, said stomach ache?" Because it kept happening at the same time of the day. And it was actually one of her favorite classes. And so it definitely, so we were able to dig in, but a lot of times your school counselors are really plugged into that kind of stuff. So that's why it's great to have them around and great to be connected with them and know who they are. Sudden changes in sleep or appetite. This can be eating more or less. This can be sleeping more or less. It can go either way. So obviously they're going to go through a sleep change in the school year. So don't look at that yet. Give it a few weeks. We want to see by the end of September, are they really just sleeping all day on Saturdays? What's going on? Persistent withdrawal or irritability. So are they constantly fighting with you? Again, the first week's going to be tough. Hopefully you're not fighting, but if this happens during the first week, this is not the end of the world. If it's still happening at the end of September into October, we might want to worry about it and start to seek other supports. Okay. A drop in grades or a refusal to do schoolwork or not wanting to go to school, all clear signs. So when this stuff starts to happen, you can start by doing a few things first, just plugging into it, saying, "I've noticed," enter the behavior and ask them, if they know what's going on. Ask open-ended questions. And then if they don't have an answer, you can just say, "Okay, well, I'm here for you," right? Just being present and not telling them what to do can feel really good. And unfortunately, as parents, sometimes we have to be patient. I am not a patient person, but patience often gives your kids the space to come to you. And if they do that, they are going to have a much stronger bond with you and come to you when things are more serious in the future. Okay, so some action steps for a smooth transition. What are we going to do? We're going to plan ahead, which will reduce last minute chaos. Remember, the goal is progress, not perfection, right? There are going to be hiccups. Every transition has this. So, what are some things? Well, we want to adjust sleep 1 to 2 weeks in advance. So, start getting your kids up around the time they need to get up for school this week and next. Okay. Start getting them to bed around that time. Rehearse morning or evening routines if you can. If you want to, a lot of the schools have a sneak a peek night right before school starts. So you can go visit the school before school starts. For younger kids or kids that are going to a new school, this is huge. It lets them know where things are, where the bathroom is, where their locker is, where their homeroom is, the front office, the counselor, things like this will be really important for them. Okay, pack a comfort item if needed. So this is definitely optional and definitely want to make sure you're following school rules. Now, if your child has um, a 507 plan or an IEP, something in place that allows them um, things like this, then no problem. If your child does have a condition where a comfort item can really help and it's not on their 504 plan, you might want to talk to the doctor that you're working with and the school counselor about adding it. For some kids, that's really helpful. And as long as it's not disruptive to other kids in class, it's usually okay. But don't just bring it without asking first. For instance, when my daughter was a little bit younger, she really struggled with time management. We worked with the teachers and we were able to get her this little timer, and it wasn't an egg timer, so it didn't make a loud noise. It actually just had lights and it had a little smiley face on the front, and the smiley face would just change colors. So it was very quiet. didn't stand out, wasn't anything dramatic. And so the teacher allowed it. And it was really helpful in helping our daughter get better time management skills. As always, keep communication open, right? We talked about vocalizing emotion words, labeling them, talking about coping mechanisms, talking about different scenarios and helping your kids prepare for it. These are all communication strategies. And also working out communication strategies when things don't go the way they're supposed to. If you've been listening to my parenting and mental health series, you've definitely heard this story before. Last year, my son started middle school, and it was the third day of school. I had to go into the office and I was seeing patients all day, and my son missed the bus. Now, he's certainly old enough to get on the bus on his own. He's a very responsible kid. He just messed up. He missed the bus. I didn't find out right away. It was a little bit chaotic for a few hours. I had to, change my work schedule, and I was a little freaked out. And luckily, he got to school because of a kind neighbor. However, in hindsight, I should have talked to my kids about if these things happen, if they miss the bus, if they get sick at school, if they forget something that they need, whatever. Think about some things that could go wrong. In fact, you can brainstorm that with your kids. If, things look like they're going wrong, what can we do to correct it? What are the options? Going through that with your kids ahead of time will be huge. Okay. So to recap, any transition period is stressful. The start of school is always a fresh chapter. So remind your kids that even if they had a rough school year last year, it's a new year, a new chance to make things different. So prepare both practically and emotionally, and you're setting your child and yourself up for a confident, resilient school year, which means making sure you're also taking care of you, which means getting sleep, eating right, and making small changes and building routines now so you're ready. Now, as always, these are the references that I used this year. If you're ever curious about these in more detail, I'm always happy to share. It's another great week with you all. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week and happy back to school.